Hello and welcome to Indylive Extra channel. We just wanted to tell you about this month's Mibby's Eye show, which is coming up on Independence Live. And it's a really interesting discussion with Kirsty Hughes about pathways for Scotland to get back into Europe. And Marlene, you interviewed Kirsty. It was very, very interesting, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. I'm sure some people will have heard Kirsty Hughes talking about, European Union, EFTA, Brexit before over the last few years. She knows her stuff, of course, so I really enjoyed talking to her. Yeah, it was good.
So you'll be able to watch the full episode from the 18th of October, but as an exclusive for Indylive Extra channel viewers, we're going to be bringing you one question a day from Kirsty in the run-up to the broadcast of the whole episode. Today's question one, is what happens when a country asks to join the EU? So here's Kirsty to explain, and come back tomorrow for the next question.
There are a whole series of steps that happen when a country applies to join the European Union. And, the bottom line is it's like any club that the existing members get to decide at the end of the day whether you can join or not. So the basic starting point is that any European country can apply to join the European Union. And back in the 80s, Morocco applied and was told, well, it's not European, so no, it couldn't apply. And when Turkey applied, and it is now a candidate, though its negotiations are very much stuck, if not frozen, there was a big discussion around, well, is Turkey European or not, or it's on the border with Asia and so on. So I think Scotland doesn't face any of those questions. Scotland is a European country. Scotland is entitled to apply to join the European Union if it's an independent country, and obviously Scotland was already a member of the European Union as part of the United Kingdom for 47 years, which is not insignificant to how the process could work. So the first stage is, you probably have some informal discussions with EU and European Commission officials as well as EU politicians first, but you put in a letter to the European Commission and you say, we would like to apply to join the European Union. The Commission then goes away and considers whether Scotland meets the criteria to be declared a candidate country. And it makes that recommendation to the European Council, in other words, to the 27 political leaders of all the EU member states. And I'm sure a lot of your audience will have heard at some point of this phrase, the Copenhagen criteria. These are criteria used to assess whether you can become a candidate country for accession to the European Union. And they were actually introduced almost 30 years ago after the Berlin Wall came down, and there was that whole long group of countries from Poland to Hungary wanting to join. And there are political criteria and there are economic criteria. And there's also a broad criteria about can Scotland, is it going to be able to take on and apply all that huge body of EU law? And then if you're declared a candidate country, there is then a bit of a pause before talks immediately start, and the European Commission will do more screening of where is the country at, where is Scotland at, to what extent do its laws already meet EU laws. And it's not only about laws, it's also about regulatory structures. What sort of competition authority has the new Scotland got? What sort of environmental body? Look at its democratic structures and so on and so forth. And when they're ready, then they will enter negotiations. And that's at the moment broken down into 35 different areas. In the jargon, they call them chapters. This is a technical and a political process. So I'm really talking you through the technical side. But at any point, the member states get to say whether to open the next chapter or not. Are they ready to discuss with the Scottish officials who'll be doing most of the technical negotiation? Are they ready to discuss the economy? Are they ready to discuss crime and justice? Are they ready to discuss trade? And as this mounts up...
Yes. Do they go through it, in an order of those chapters, or can they have several chapters open at the same time, if you see what I mean?
No, they can certainly have several chapters open at the same time. That again is going to depend partly on the member states, and this can be highly political. If you look at, for instance, the Western Balkan candidate countries like Serbia and North Macedonia. Those processes have been very, very slow and almost, I'm probably not true to say a complete sequential opening of chapters, but if member states want to move slowly because they're not sure countries are ready, or they're not sure the EU is ready, or for instance, Kosovo, which isn't a candidate because it's not yet recognized by all EU member states. So politics can certainly intervene, and you wouldn't open all 35 at once because that's too much as well. But no, you don't have to do it one at a time.
So say then we've worked through those chapters. What happens next?
Well, if you've worked through all those chapters, and while you're working through them, normally candidate countries do get so-called pre-accession assistance, which is a nice way to say some funding. So hopefully there might be some funding available for some of the things that we would have to do. If everything is completed, then the European Commission goes back again to the European Council, the political leaders, and says, we're done, and Scotland's ready to join. Now, of course, there may be some specific little adjustments that have been negotiated with Scotland. So there may be some transition periods that are specific to Scotland for whatever reason. When Denmark joined back when at the same time as the UK, there was a little deal around purchasing of holiday homes in Denmark. They were worried that they'd all be taken over by Germans flooding north.
Is there any particular chapter that you think might be a bit of a, need a bit more work on, or does it seem fairly straightforward given that, until recently we were in the EU?
It does depend how far we've diverged from EU law. And that's why what Liz Truss is up to with her new government is rather important actually to this, because if there is a really hasty repeal of lots of EU laws in the coming years, and this is laws over almost half a century, as you know, this is laws that regulate the chemical industry, health and safety, workers' rights, so on and so forth. So if Scotland can't avoid being caught up in that, and if it's major, though I think they'll find it hard to move very quickly on it, if it's major, then that means it will take more time to reinstate those laws and to show that you're implementing them. One of the things that the EU discovered as it negotiated with the Central and East European countries after the Berlin Wall came down was it's one thing that countries pass the law, but another that something's really being implemented, there are checks and controls. So the more the UK diverges, the slower it may be for Scotland. But I don't think that means necessarily particular transition periods. I think there is the ever-returning question of the currency. What will Scotland be doing when it applies for the EU? Will it be using the pound, or will it already have a Scottish currency? So if it is using the pound, though, looking again at what the Truss government are doing, the pound may have collapsed so far, that may no longer be a sensible policy. But if it is, that will be something tricky to talk through about, well, when is Scotland either going to have its own currency or join the euro, and can it have a transition period, or would it have to wait before it can join? So that's one issue. I think all the border issues should have been resolved before joining. I don't really see why there would be any transition issues. The transition, in a sense, will have happened before. If on day one of independence you have a certain trade relationship with the rest of the UK and a certain trade relationship with the EU, in the next few years before you negotiate and join the EU, you will have already seen what was coming. Unlike with Brexit, there's no need to do it in the way Boris Johnson did it. There will need to be, if we're to be in the common travel area, there'll need to be an opt-out from the Schengen border-free area, just as Ireland has, but then that will be part of the negotiations. So things like opt-outs, permanent opt-outs, that will have to be agreed before the Commission goes to the Council and says, we're ready, let's have an accession treaty. Whereas things like currency especially, may need a transition period.
So I hope you enjoyed that, and come back tomorrow for the next question, which will be,
how long might European Union negotiations take? Would it be months? Would it be some years? I hope that's the next segment of the interview.